guys, welcome back. So today's video is going to be on affordable brushes for beginners. So I'm going to be going step by step on the 5 brushes that you would need as a beginner. So if you're interested, let's get into it. So there are 5 main brushes that I would recommend as a beginner. Yes. Only 5. I think that's enough. I don't think you need more than that because I feel like after that it gets a little bit more complicated. I'll be sharing with you guys step by step these 5 basic brushes, and I also have a very detailed makeup for beginners video. If you haven't checked that out, I will leave that at the end of the video. So first we're gonna start off with foundation. So for foundation, there are 2 main brushes that are commonly used, which is a rounded foundation brush and a flat kabuki brush. So the rounded foundation brush is good for applying liquid or powdered foundation because they're rounded, and rounded brushes really help blend out powdered products better on your skin because they allow you to buff it into your skin versus pressing it against your skin. My favorite rounded brush for foundation is the NYX foundation brush. It's an affordable one and a really good quality brush as well. I also love this Morphe M439 brush as well. They're both rounded brushes that are perfect for blending out liquid foundation. So next we have a flat kabuki brush, which is good for cream or liquid foundation because it's flat at the top, so it allows you to stipple and press the product against your skin without creating any streaks or patches on your skin. And then lastly, for foundation, you can use a beauty sponge, which is what I always use, and I would recommend a beauty sponge if you have dry skin. So with the beauty sponge, I like to make sure that it's damp, okay? Make sure that it's not wet, it's not runny, it's like damp, meaning like you can feel that wet, moist texture, but you don't really get any water when you squeeze the beauty blender. Beauty sponges are usually used for thicker foundations because they tend to absorb a lot of product. So you want to make sure that you're not using a super liquid foundation with a beauty blender. And like I mentioned, it's also really nice for dry skin because the wetness of the sponge allows the foundation to blend better on dry textured skin because it gives the skin a little bit of moisture while blending out the foundation. It can also be used to finish the blending of your foundation with the brush by picking up the excess foundation on your skin that the brush left, and this creates an even more flawless finish, which I like to do all the time when I'm using a brush. So next is concealer. So for concealer, I like using a beauty sponge to blend it out. My favorite beauty sponge is the e.l.f. Camo sponge. This one is also $6, very affordable, and I really like this for under the eyes because it has this sharp pointy part of it that really gets under your eyes and allows it to blend right where it creases. This one is really affordable and it's also a really good quality sponge. Brushes are a little bit harsh on your under eyes, and you don't want to always use something harsh under your eyes because it can damage the skin on there. I also really like using a damp sponge because it has a little bit of moisture from the water, therefore it allows the concealer to blend out better and it doesn't leave your under eyes feeling dry because of that moisture. So for contour, you want to use an angled brush. So anywhere where you have a bone structure, you want to go in with an angled brush because it fits perfectly on that bone. So such as like your cheekbones, your jawline, and the bridge of your nose. I would recommend angled brushes that have softer bristles versus dense bristles because they really help to hug your cheekbones. Therefore, you want it to be more of a softer blend than a harsher blend for contour. So I always like to think about it like when you hug somebody, you want to give them a nice warm hug. You don't want it to be too harsh and too like aggressive and make them uncomfortable. You want to give them a nice, soft, loving hug. So remember, your contour brushes should really be hugging your cheekbones and your jawlines and your bone structure in a very nice, soft way versus harsh way, because when you make it harsh, it looks unblended. If you're looking for a little bit of a sharper contour, I would recommend a brush that is a little bit more dense, but not too dense. I really like this Real Techniques 200 brush. So this one is a little bit more dense. It's not an angle brush as well, so it gives you more of that sharper contour, so it doesn't really hug your cheeks as much. Alright, so next we have setting powder, and for setting powder, I just use the same sponge that I use for the concealer, and I like it damp as well, so I don't wait for it to be dry. I like using a damp sponge for setting powder. I just press the sponge onto the setting powder. I press it at the back of my hand, and I use it to set the areas that I applied concealer. I would definitely recommend this for beginners because I wouldn't recommend you getting a brush just for setting powder, because I feel like setting powders, I usually set set flawlessly with a damp beauty sponge, especially the one that you use for the concealer, because it has a little bit of that concealer, a little bit of that moisture on there, so it gives you a flawless blend. Alright, so next we have bronzer. So bronzer is quite similar to contour. So for bronzer, I like using a tapered brush because you apply bronzer on the same areas where you place contour, which is the cheekbones, the jawline, the forehead. Sometimes I apply it on the bridge of my nose, but we focus the bronzer slightly above the contour, which is why you want to use a tapered brush. So tapered brushes are brushes that are flat on the sides and pointy at the top. Tapered brushes are different from angle brushes because they're more precise, so they allow for better placement on small cheeks, while angle brushes help blend out contour by placing the contour on the hollows of the cheeks, which is slightly below your cheeks. So remember, it's contour, bronzer, then blush, which we're gonna get into blush next. My favorite taper brush for bronzer is the Morphe M527 brush. And if you have smaller cheeks, I would get the Morphe M405 brush. So for blush, I like using also a tapered brush. Tapered brushes are good for blush because they're flat on the side, so they help with gently applying the blush on the cheeks with a patting motion. You don't want to use brushes with stiffer bristles for blush because they're more densely packed. You don't want to pack on too much of the blush because the blush is going to look unblended. So you want to use a brush with softer bristles. It would softly apply the blush on your cheeks. My favorite is the Real Techniques blush brush. So this one is a taper brush. So it's flat on the sides and sharp at the top. So it's good for picking up blush and putting it on the apples of your cheeks. Morphe also has a really nice blush brush. So it's the Morphe E3 brush, which is also very similar to the Real Techniques brush because it's also tapered and it's also good for blush application. Alright, so lastly we have highlighters. So there are two types of brushes that you can use for highlighter. The first one is a fan brush. So this type of brush is good for highlighter because it's very, very lightweight. So it gives you more of that swiping and sweeping blend. You also don't want to use a dance brush for applying highlighter because highlighter should be really soft and blended. So you want to use a fluffy fan brush. Another brush that is good for highlighter is the Morphe M501 brush. So this one is a small tapered brush and it's used to pick up more of the highlighter pigments. So if you want to use a lot of highlighter, I would recommend using this brush. But if you want more of that softer, lighter coverage, you want to use the fan brush. I also like using this M501 brush to apply highlighter at the button of my nose because it's sharp at the top, so it really fits really nicely with that rounded area. And I also use this brush to apply highlighter on my forehead because I have that pointy part of my forehead right here, and using a sharp tapered brush is perfect for that because it really helps to circulate around that round area on my forehead, diffusing the highlighter everywhere. That's it for this video. Don't forget to check out my next video over here. So this is the makeup for beginners video that I was talking about earlier. I would highly recommend you checking it out. But other than that, I will see you guys in my next video.
KLJ, welcome to a channel where it's poppin'.